Hey everyone! You've probably heard many photographers share advice like golden hour is the only good time to shoot, or you should always use an 85mm for portraits. But I'm going to share why these are actually photography myths that are holding you back from improving your work and what you should do instead. And I have 5 myths that we're going to dive into today. So let's start with number 1, which is golden hour is the only good time to shoot. Look, I'm a huge golden hour fan as much as the next photographer. It is one of the most beautiful times of day to be able to shoot soft, dreamy, magical images. But is it the only good time to shoot? Definitely not. Portraits can be taken at any time of day, even with natural light, and those portraits can look great if you use the right techniques. Some of my favorite photos are actually taken an hour or two after the harshest midday sun, so this is when the sun is still quite up high in the sky. Compared to golden hour images, which can be more muted in color and a bit washed out from the soft backlight, photos taken in brighter sunlight are much more contrasty and have more vibrant colors too. Not all photographers have the luxury of being able to shoot during golden hour either, so you should definitely learn how to make the most of any kind of lighting you potentially need to shoot in. And I'm actually super excited to announce that I have released my very own natural lighting online workshop, and it is available right now. So I take you out on location and talk you through every single natural lighting scenario there is and how to make the most of it in any situation. I share how to meter your exposure for the best results, how to get the best photos without any extra equipment like reflectors and a heat mall. So if you're interested in this, please make sure to check it out down below with the link in my description. Okay, myth number 2 is you have to follow all the composition rules. And to that I say, rules are there to be broken. While I do think it's important to learn different kinds of compositions and practice them in your work, once you are comfortable and feel like you're consistently capturing good images, it's time to push the boundaries to see what you're able to come up with. If you're constantly following the main composition rules, so things like the rule of thirds or leading lines are some popular ones, then you're always going to end up with the same looking images. And that's great when you're starting out and trying to build a consistent portfolio, but eventually you're going to want to experiment. What I like to personally do is crop out body parts from the image on purpose. So for example, you'll see me usually cropping out a little bit of someone's foot from the frame. The reason I like to do this is to add tension to my image, and it allows me to frame my shot just that little bit closer as well. In some poses, when the subject is sitting down, you're also seeing the bottom of the shoe, which in my opinion is not something super important to keep in the frame. So when that happens, I'll try to crop some of it out with my composition. I would recommend to stick to the compositions you know work for the majority of your photo shoot, but then dedicate a little bit of time here and there to try something different, because you never know what you might stumble across that works for you and helps your work stand out. The third myth that I hear all the time, even to this day, is that only certain focal lengths work for portraits, and they are usually referring to the fact that you should only use telephoto lenses like 85mm or 135mm for portrait photography. So let's start with the pros to this myth, which yes, telephotos can be so beautiful to shoot portraits with. You have stunning compression from these longer focal lengths that cause the subject to pop nicely from the background. You can get some really nice bokeh in your frame, and it can make an ordinary location look super dreamy and otherworldly. But are these the only focal lengths you should use to shoot portraits with? No. As a portrait photographer myself, my favorite focal length is actually 35mm, which is considered a wide angle lens. One of the reasons I love this focal length so much is because you can see so much more of the location in the frame. I spend hours and hours location scouting and finding the perfect spots to shoot in, so a lot of the time I want to incorporate the location in my photos and not just blur them out completely. So something like a 35mm is a great focal length to do that with, as it still makes your subject look prominent in the frame, but it's wide enough that even when you shoot wide open at f1.4, you can still see and make out quite a lot of the location you're shooting in. Just like compositions, you'll never know what kind of unique photos you'll capture unless you experiment, and that includes with focal lengths too. I did a photo shoot I really love on a 24mm where I was able to capture some fun perspectives since it's such a wide angle lens to shoot portraits with. speaking of locations, myth number 4 is that you always need a perfect background. And to be honest, while I do love a good location and I'm usually very inspired by locations to create a photo shoot, when you see some of the spots from my photos in real life, they actually look really ordinary or sometimes even ugly. Sometimes they're the kind of spots you wouldn't even give a second thought to if you walk by it on the street, to be honest. But I find those to be some of my favorite places to shoot. So for example, I get super excited when I find a field of overgrown flowers, and as soon as I come across one, I will plan a shoot immediately to be able to get some photos there. Usually, my number one mission in spring is to go and location scout as much as possible to find any colors that I can shoot with. But realistically, these kinds of magical locations, I like to call them, are few and far between. And we need to learn to make do with less in our daily lives as photographers while still delivering great images. And it's absolutely possible. Something you might notice about those flower locations is they are quite grand, but you don't always need such a physically large location to work with for portraits. In fact, most of the time, the locations I'm shooting in are actually really quite small in real life. I'm always on the lookout for nice leaves to shoot with, and I found this little patch of them on the side of the road to capture these portraits. Or for these photos, I was in a park that had a nice overgrown area of weeds, which is what I mean about a location that you wouldn't even give a second thought to, but when you look at it with a camera, it's actually a super pretty spot for photos. What I find more important than the location a lot of the time is actually the lighting. So if you have good lighting, then you can often get away with a little bit more with your location. The final myth is one that I think stops some photographers from wanting to pursue this full time because it's tricky to achieve, and that is you need a studio to take professional portraits. Just take it from me, if you watch the videos on my channel and you're familiar with my work, you would know that that's absolutely not true. Sometimes a wall with some good natural light and even some reflectors can go a really long way. Many incredible portraits are taken on location or in a simple home studio setup with minimal gear. I personally like finding more natural locations for my style of work, but sometimes I do like a more minimal look to my photos. So what I do in those instances is find some plain walls to work with. In this case, I found this large concrete style wall on a quiet street that had perfect lighting as it was in the shade, but the wall across the street was white, so it acted like a perfect natural reflector. This myth also does depend on the type of work you're wanting to do. For example, if you want a more studio photography style or you're offering actors headshots, then yes, you would need to set up some studio lighting to be able to achieve that look. But like I said, you can start out with a more minimal setup at home to start building up your client base to afford hiring a studio in those situations. Let me know what photography myths you've heard of, and if you want to see a part 2, I actually have a bunch more that I can already think of. But thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to check out my natural lighting workshop. I'll leave it linked down below, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!